I was living it up big in Asia. But some unfortunate things happened, which resulted in me running out of money. So this meant I had to go back to the States.
Mama dropped me off at the airport, I almost cried. Cheated many times, tell you sorry, I don't know why. Heartbreak key, but I really just wanna see you smile. Take a little drug, take a little lean, tryna slow it down.
I'm finally back in the States, and I can't help but notice why some urban places kind of feel off. Like, these places have reasonable amounts of density and mixed use, but don't feel lively. Some would even describe these places as soulless or even dead. So why is that? Why do people think these developments feel this way? The South Lake Union neighborhood usually comes up in discussion as an example. This neighborhood seems to have everything going for it on paper. It's zoned for mixed use, it's close to downtown, and it has density. On the ground, it can sometimes be a mixed bag. Here are some characteristics I noticed. Wide buildings. There are a lot of wide buildings in South Lake Union. It's not uncommon to have a single building stretched down a whole block. This limits the variety you get on a city block. A similarly sized city block with multiple narrower buildings provide more variety and interest when compared to a single facade. Let's compare two similar city blocks with residential mid-rises, one in South Lake Union and the other in Capitol Hill. This one in South Lake Union is made up of two buildings with your standard new construction appearance all throughout, while the one in Capitol Hill is made up of many buildings within the same block size. It definitely has the blocky and repetitive looking buildings that people love to hate, but seeing multiple of them makes it more interesting than looking at a single continuous facade. Each one of these buildings is ornamented with their own landscaping, which add additional variety when compared to the single kind of landscaping in the big South Lake Union building. Having a larger building footprint can also influence other patterns that can make the place feel dead, like how some buildings will have a wall and nothing along the street, or by having large storefronts for commercial spaces. Big storefronts limit the kind of businesses that can operate in that area. Smaller storefronts are often more affordable and appropriate for small businesses. The average business in Pike Place, one of the biggest tourist attractions in the city, isn't very big. Kitschy and unique shops are not going to be able to afford big ass spaces, so they get filled with gyms and dental offices instead, which makes window shopping a little awkward. Sometimes there are only offices or apartment lobbies on the bottom floor, like no one's hanging out in the lobby, and honestly it's kinda uncomfortable being here. Office buildings centralized in the area can create pockets of inactive spaces whenever it's outside of business hours. Activity all throughout the day and week keep areas feeling lively and active. Sometimes the sameness of the design can make it hard to tell what's what. For example, the front of the apartments and businesses all kinda look the same. It's hard to tell if someone lives here at a glance. Ornamentation and entrance design can make people's homes and businesses more visible, like storefronts adding interesting and captivating signage or painting the exterior to match their brand. Having the storefront be customizable too would also allow businesses to alter the front to suit their needs and to further distinguish themselves. A lot of these storefronts in these new buildings kinda seem limited in how much they can change their appearance. It's almost always a standard sign on the top with vinyl stickers on the windows. Maybe it's in the lease or something, but it's definitely holding these places back. Residents should also have outdoor spaces that they can decorate and customize. Balconies or small patios are great and are used by those who live there. Things like these add signs of life to the neighborhood. If you see flowers or a cafe table decorating a house, you probably know someone lives there, versus just a blank door opening straight onto the sidewalk. And also as a side note, a lot of these windows in new construction are not made to be compatible with window AC units. So every summer we get to see everyone's attempt to jerry-rig a window cover for their portable AC unit. Bring back vertical sliding windows, please? This wouldn't be an urbanism video without some car shit talking. Cars have definitely contributed to the deadness of the area. A lot of these buildings have parking garages. The exits and entrances are sometimes hidden away in alleys, but they look like a crater on the side of the building whenever they're by the sidewalk. In addition to making the neighborhood look worse, they're also expensive to build. Underground garages are the most common in the area, but they are some of the most expensive parking spots to build and maintain. They can add millions of dollars to construction costs, and these costs are passed along to renters in the form of higher rents for commercial and residential spaces. There was actually a parking spot that was listed on sale for $50,000. This listing made the news for how absurd that cost was, but that is literally how much these things cost to build. The impact of the car is not just limited to garages. There are multiple wide roads that cut through the neighborhood, creating valleys of noise and empty space. This is not a chill place to be if you're outside on the sidewalk here. They are annoying to cross, and they take longer to cross because of the extra width. And this one on Mercer Street can sometimes even take 2 light cycles to fully cross. These uncomfortable roads discourage pedestrians from walking by them, and can limit foot traffic from entering the neighborhood. I remember the first time I visited Seattle, I was staying in a hotel right by 7th Avenue North in SLU. When I went to cross that street at night, it felt just really empty. This is what 7th Avenue North looks like now, but back then, I was crossing this at night. I also crossed Mercer and Dexter on that first trip too. It left an impression on me that Seattle was a little barren. Uncomfortable crossings aren't all that good, but what's even worse is when there are no crossings at all. I-5 basically breaks the street network between South Lake Union and Capitol Hill, so any foot traffic traveling between the two neighborhoods has to be funneled along these sketchy crossings over the freeway. Before I-5, there was a continuous street grid that crossed over between the two neighborhoods. These apartments in South Lake Union look so out of place now, but they were likely the only remnants that were spared from the demolition to create I-5. As a consequence, this area along I-5 doesn't have much going on. People have to go out of their way to get here, resulting in a lot of inactivity. It affects transit and biking too, because they're also funneled to these congested bridges. There's even a song about how unreliable the 8 bus is, which is routed on this bridge. This was a long-winded way of saying that the development of the neighborhood doesn't feel organic. It seems very sudden and all at once. It's easy to keep dunking on South Lake Union, but there's a reason why this neighborhood is like this. Before it became the tech campus of the city, it was mostly an industrial and commercial district. In the 90s, the area was zoned for mostly commercial use with C1 and C2 zoning. C1 and C2 zoning in Seattle are auto-oriented commercial areas and are characterized by large parcels that favor automobile access over pedestrians and transit. Conversations were going around in the 90s regarding the future of South Lake Union. Construction of the Fred Hutch Research Center, along with new hotels and restaurants by Lake Union, paralleled with the decline of the maritime industry, signaled the direction where the neighborhood was headed. Architect Frederick Bassetti and columnist John Hinterberger proposed the idea of Seattle Commons, a park stretching from Lake Union down to Denny Way and connecting over to Seattle Center. This proposal also included things like a park lid going over Mercer Street and green streets with tree canopy and separation of traffic. This idea attracted the attention of Paul Allen, the co-founder of Microsoft and local billionaire. Allen put $20 million behind the committee formed for Seattle Commons to buy land, and a tax levy to fund the rest of the cost was put forth for Seattle to vote on. There was a pushback from voters citing the business disruptions and displacements of the SLU community. There were also suspicions that Paul Allen himself would financially benefit from the completion of the project. Some critics have remarked that this would create a yuppie heaven or a yuppie ghetto. This tax levy failed to pass twice, so the land purchased from the Seattle Commons Committee was acquired by Allen. Around this time, the city was working on their comprehensive plan for managing its urban growth. They talk about the urban villages concept where density and mixed uses are kept concentrated in certain parts of the city. It details that South Lake Union is one of the places designated to be a hub urban village, eventually leading to a rezone of that neighborhood to be Seattle mixed use. Paul Allen, now with acres of land in his possession, has his real estate company redevelop the land following the rezoning. By the 2000s, Vulcan Real Estate has started breaking ground with their redevelopment frenzy of South Lake Union. This frenzy, along with the boom in the tech industry, led to building new developments in South Lake Union to meet the demands for offices and houses. It became a convenient place to shoehorn a rapidly growing industry with Vulcan Real Estate at the helm. In the place where we would have had Seattle Commons Park, we now have Amazon Office, Amazon Office, Amazon Office, Amazon Office, and Google Office, and so on. It seems like instead of choosing Yuppie Heaven, we chose Yuppie Hell. The neighborhood's shortcomings come from having a car-centric skeleton from its infrastructure and past land uses, mixed with rapid redevelopment of large parcels to meet the demand of a booming industry. This was enabled by a zoning policy that focused developments in concentrated areas that was capitalized by a real estate company which happened to own land just at the right time, resulting in South Lake Union as we know it today.
And you don't seem to understand.
I'm not entirely sure if this could have been avoided. Highly central land was repurposed to house thousands of people and to provide a place for the city's growing industry. By not doing so, it would have pushed that development pressure elsewhere in more vulnerable places. There's definitely room for improvement. One of the criticisms of the redevelopments was that the housing mostly catered to the wealthier yuppie workers of the companies that grew in that neighborhood. While there are some buildings created by nonprofits that provide housing to lower income residents, they make up a small portion of the total housing in the area. Some of the things that can make a neighborhood lively can also add costs to providing housing. Things I mentioned before, like balconies and patios, add costs. And building many smaller buildings rather than one singular big one can also be less efficient for providing housing. Housing has to be affordable to create for it to be affordable to live in. The city of Seattle could have played a bigger role in shaping the direction of the neighborhood by joining in on the land acquisition frenzy and having a more hands-on approach with urban planning. But at the time, the voters of the city voted down the tax levies for Seattle Commons twice, so it's not entirely clear that the public would have been receptive to additional tax levies to fund the city to build out SLU, in a state with the most regressive tax system. And even so, public housing construction would have ran into difficulties due to the Faircloth Amendment being passed in 1998 as part of the Quality Housing and Work Responsibility Act. This amendment prevents public housing authorities from using federal money to fund the construction or operation of new public housing units that would increase the number of units past the amount the public housing authorities had under management in 1999. Zoning changes to allow for higher densities on all residential land and zoning for more mixed-use areas could have lessened the demand for building out South Lake Union. But it's not too clear to what extent things would have been changed, since much of the area was already owned by one real estate company with plans of ambitious redevelopment. Structurally, we are not ready to adequately tackle the effects of fast economic development and population growth in a fair way. Legislation at the federal and state levels limit funding and suppress the number of public projects that supplement the gaps in the private market. Building unique livable cities with the capacity to include people of all backgrounds requires concerted effort from all levels, including local voters to the federal government. And until we're all on the same page, more stories like South Lake Union's redevelopment are going to repeat themselves.